Confucius and some of those Eastern philosophers and stuff like that. There's so much that is passed down through there. And then so much of the history we have is because something fantastic enough that. All right, welcome to another episode of the Joe and Doug Show. We're excited to be with you. Joe is back. He was out here Thursday. He was riding roller coasters and eating chocolate. And
jealous?
I'm not a big. Sam would be jealous. I'm not a big roller coaster person. I prefer my feet on the ground. I mean, I would never jump out of an airplane. I mean, there's never a good reason to jump out of a perfectly good airplane. I wouldn't bungee jump. I don't even like going up on ladders. So,
can I tell you my chocolate story?
Yeah, let's do it.
So I said I'm gonna eat dark chocolate, right? So I went into the chocolate factory and I'm making this dark chocolate thing, and I'm like, okay, dark chocolate. And you know what they did? They dip it in milk chocolate. So I get this dark chocolate dipped in milk chocolate. I was like, what? why would you ruin dark chocolate like that? But anyway, so I decided to eat it anyway, and that threw me out of keto, and so it was all game over.
Game on.
It is
at that point, not game over, game on. And so, what was the best thing you ate since you were out of keto?
I ate everything. I did. I ate bagels, and I ate pizza. And
yes,
I ate
Lord.
Chicken nuggets and wine, and I just had everything all at once too. So I mean, it was terrible. I thought I was going to have the hangover.
Debbie had to hold your hair back while you were throwing up.
No,
later?
I didn't. It didn't affect me at all. Like I thought I was totally going to be hungover on it, but it went fine. So there you go.
Nice.
By the way, interview was great that you guys put on when I watched it on the trip there. You guys did an awesome job.
It was a ton of fun, and yeah, I think we had 800, 900 views so far. So a lot of people watched it, which is cool. And I hope it helps people. I mean, that was really the goal in doing it. Like our show, every week we want to help you take the next step in your journey. See what I did there with that segue?
Look at that.
Like that? It's like we've been doing this for a little bit.
That's right. Segue, baby.
Yeah. January will be 1 year.
Is it really?
Isn't that crazy?
Holy crap.
I mean, September we started experimenting of 20.
You know what we should do? We should take those early ones and compare it to today's ones and see if we've done anything different.
You have some ones that we did like in the dark at church that were so bad. And I mean, the content was probably good and we laughed a bunch, but you couldn't see us or hear us. And,
no, that was a pilot episode, but those are the best because if you wanted to make a contrast between then and now, that would do it.
100%. So we had some interesting stuff happen. Yesterday, I got to spend time with an arson investigator. That was exciting.
How does that even go down?
So I was sitting in our admin's office at the church and going, do you hear those sirens? Yeah, I hear those sirens. Why are they getting louder? All of a sudden, why are they pulling into the church parking lot? All of a sudden, I look on the security cameras, and in the back, a set of brush that we had pulled out when we redid the parking lot and cleaned up, and we just set it in the back, and there's a couple trees we had dropped. Smoke coming up, fire, and we have security cameras, so we pulled it up, and there was a kid that was in there doing stuff that he shouldn't have been and set it on fire. And so the police and the fire department, it was a good 2 hour of my day that I really enjoyed getting to play.
When I was a kid, that was me. I was
so I learned something though.
Yes.
The reason that they're like, look, it's a brush fire, like thank God it wasn't somebody's house or car, like something along those lines. But the police officer said that the reason that they want to catch the individual is not necessarily because they want to slam them with a crime, but the homicidal triad, I learned something standing there, is obsession with fire, cruelty to animals, and bedwetting. It is almost the consistent MO of every school shooter. And
no kidding.
He was going through this whole thing, and I'm like, and he goes, so when we see a teenager like this that sets a fire, we want to make sure that there aren't other factors because they'll tip us off to, should we be concerned about this, or was this really just I was bored and had nothing better to do kind of deal? Probably like your fires were. Did you set fires as a kid?
It was bad. Well, see, I had neighbors that were bullies. And so what they would do is they'd take the younger kids and they would set them up on doing really crazy things, like make them do them. Like you won't roll around in the poison ivy, and you won't call the neighbor a bitch, or you won't set that thing on fire. And as little kids, you're like, oh, I will. Let's do this.
I got the torch.
Oh, exactly. Go. And so, yeah, I said there was a lady that had that did like these controlled burns where she'd burn her leaves and whatever, and she made a pretty big pile. And they're like, I bet you won't set fire to that. Yeah, I will. And I set fire to a whole row of these monstrous oak trees.
Oh my goodness.
And it was so bad. that when I woke up in the morning, like I got reamed for this one, but the big oak tree had fallen after the fire, and it was huge. It went across like 3 yards. It was amazing. That was all my doing.
When I was in middle school, incense was really cool. My parents were more concerned that I was like smoking and trying to cover it up, or I was like trying pot, and so they would like peek in my room every once in a while, and I had bought these like cubes of incense and then the sticks with incense at the carnival that came through every year. They had a little shop and you could buy stuff, and I bought a bunch and I was all excited, and I, my little 8x10 bedroom lighting incense, my dad's like, it smells like crap in here, getting all upset. Well, I had this old school, you remember the popcorn tins that you would get for like Christmas? Right. It was an old school basketball one with Michael Jordan and like Larry Bird and like, those type of players. So that puts the time frame in there. And I had it as a trash can in my room for forever. And it was full of paper and all sorts of stuff. And my dad was yelling at me to put something out from downstairs. So I quick, put it in there, and all of a sudden, I was like, Mom! And she comes running in, grabs the trash can, throws it in the bathtub, turns the water on, and that's how I almost burnt down my house.
Wow.
So,
all right. That's probably the worst thing you did as a kid.
Yeah, probably.
That was the biggest offense.
No, yeah. And most of the time I confessed quickly. I was always like, yeah, it was totally me. Yeah. Well, I want to jump in and chat a little bit.
I derailed you for 12 minutes.
You did. It was good. It was good catching up. We need a couple of those derailed type of episodes where we just kind of wander and talk about what we want to talk about. I want to just spin this for a moment, and you've inspired just some crazy stuff. I know in me, and we've talked about manifesting before, and we've talked about really creating the world that you want to have.
Yep.
And you and I've done that personally. We've talked about the parallels and the crossovers into faith, in terms of Christian faith, and where I see that in Scripture, and where some of those principles may, because I really believe all truth is God's truth. Like, He created the universe and the world and put certain rules and things in place. And we're gonna have to do, I think, probably a series on this, because I've read Think and Grow Rich, which is your book. And I think either Thursday or Tuesday next week, we should unpack a chapter of that together. I think it'd be really fun. And I know that's something you're well versed in, and maybe I can kind of interview you through that. But, you have been, you've had two kind of big things going on, and some things you've really, just have come like no problem. And then other things you've been running up against it. Right now you're in the process of trying to find a piece of land to build the RV deal.
Yep, right.
And you've hit a little bit of obstacle and obstruction. We've talked about that a little bit. So what I want to talk about is, what do you do when you're doing all the right things and the results just aren't coming? So sometimes you do, you've positioned yourself, you're getting up, you're praying the right way, you're seeing the right things, you're formulating everything, and stuff's just coming to you. And it's like, man, this isn't even fair. Like, I'm not even trying. Right. And then other times you're doing the exact same thing you were doing before, and you're like, I can't catch a break.
Yeah.
This got derailed, or this didn't go right. And that illustration in my head is the thing that I think is probably most at the forefront for you. Is so what do you do in those moments? You just keep plugging away? Do you some people are like, this stuff doesn't work, and just throw it out,
right?
Or does it just work in its own time? So talk about that a little bit, because you've run into that, I'm sure, multiple times.
I'm not outcome based. Okay, so as part of the process, there's always something that I need to develop, I need to learn, I need to know, I need instructions, right? And sometimes, like, when you're on, what you're supposed to be working on, and you're on that, but it's not happening the way that you pictured it, then you kind of backtrack and say, okay, well, what part of this have I not gotten? Did I not get right instruction? Did I have not done the right thing? So it's a way for you to kind of recoil a little bit back and say, okay, I missed a step. I did something I shouldn't have done, or I haven't done something that I need to do. And I get these little messages, and there's a way that infinite intelligence or God or whatever you want to call
Whatever
it,
the verb is,
gives you the wink or the nod or the nudging that you're still on track and you need to keep going. With a lot of people, it's numbers, right?
Okay.
There's some numbers that occur that you see. Sometimes it's like just a nudging where you get a message that wouldn't have happened in normal conversation, but
Sure.
it's like the way of the world speaking to you that you're right on the right path. And so the first thing I do is I'll pray to make sure that I'm still supposed to be on the same path.
Mhm.
I'll wait for that message to say, okay, now what did I miss last time that I should have gotten? And when I do that, when I take that step back, a lot of things that I would have missed if I would have just gone like headlong into something, if I wouldn't have taken a step back and looked at the landscape, I would have totally missed.
Okay. I want to play devil's advocate
Yes.
a little bit. My dad always said to me, why would you want to be his advocate? Which is a fair question. But in this case, I just want to play the opposite
Sure.
side of this. So, because I've gotten some pushback on this as I've started to feel through this for myself and really look at where, kind of my Christian faith and where that intersects with Scripture. And you and I've had some of that conversation. What do you do when you have two people wanting to bring about two different results? So, for instance, right now, there are a lot of people visualizing and manifesting Joe Biden being our president. There are a lot of people manifesting and visualizing Donald Trump being our president.
This is a good question. I like this question.
How? Who wins? I mean, is it the battle of the force? Is it whoever believes more? How do you sort through that? Because they're both essentially functioning from similar principles, and they're putting their faith into practice and their belief into practice, and one of those two outcomes is not going to happen.
Right. And so that's why I say that's not outcome based, because if you say that there's got to be, if you believe in that winner versus the winner that's supposed to be, it's a completely different deal. You've got to warm up to the fact that the thing that's supposed to happen might not be the thing that you want to happen. So you got to be open to the possibility that what's supposed to happen is not what you have in mind. And that's a tough thing to get your arms around once you've sort of decided what you want to happen.
Interesting. Okay. So the faith then, I'm going to keep pushing this. This is fun.
Yeah.
So then the faith in this process is more about who you trust in that process than it is the actual results. People will say it this way. It's more about the journey than the destination. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Sort
in that
of.
sense?
But you have to, if you don't set goals that have some kind of outcome in mind. So for instance, let's use $1 million. Okay. So what would happen if you were 10 years old and you said, I want $1 million, and that it was just given to you? It'd destroy you, right? You wouldn't be able to handle it.
Have you ever seen the movie Blank Check? Blank Check was the movie back in the day. That kid found the check and then writes himself $1 million check and goes to the bank and they cash it for him, and he buys a mansion and he throws these parties and he gets a chauffeur and he eats ice cream.
Would not happen like
It's
that.
amazing.
But
that was my dream as a child.
So if in mind you're like, okay, well, I know why my body and my mind wished for that, because that would be a really, really good outcome. But how would you be able to phrase it so that you would want to have what you're supposed to have, and you really want it to be $1 million? So you got to kind of posture yourself. So you got to prop yourself up, so you will be given the amount of money that you can handle and you deserve if you asked for that version of it. So this around, what if you only deserved $1 and you got $1 and say, okay, well, that's my message. I only should have $1 right now. So what do I have to do then to get to the point where I should have $1 million? That's more on me than what I need to wish for. But if I'm blessed with what I'm supposed to have, then I get to play a part in this, and it's not this thing that's gifted from the magical universe. I'm setting myself up so I can handle the part that I'm asking for.
Interesting. So you're saying it's more a matter of stewardship than it is necessarily rub the genie and get what you want.
Bingo. That's a way to make it not magical.
Yeah. No. That makes sense, because I think a lot of people, when they think of prayer or they think of, the idea or concept that you hear some folks talk about, and the idea of manifesting something or putting their faith into something, speaking something into existence, all those kind of that verbiage, you think like, well, I have this wish list and here we go, we're going to go to, the genie, and Christians do this as much as anybody, treat God like, hey, you're going to give me the 3 things that I want because I prayed. And you're saying, if I steward what I have well, and my expectations are set that I will have what I deserve, then I will get what I deserve and I'll be thankful for what I have.
Yeah, because it'll be authentic. You'll see what you're supposed to have, and then you'll try to be better so that you could deserve more. Because the end up goal is that I want to have $1 million, and as long as you let me know what I should have, I know what I'm working up to. Don't give me an inauthentic $1 million because I'll give it right back because I don't know if I deserve it or not.
So let's play this then. I want to go down this path.
I love this.
Good. So the person who super healthy, right, goes to the gym, eats all the right stuff, model physique, takes care of their body, deserves to have the body that they have. They put the time, effort, energy, eating the right things, gets sick, and irreparably so. Do they deserve the sickness? I'm being devil's advocate here.
Sure. And that's a question that when in kind of an open-ended thing, like what about that guy, like as being the exception?
Because I get that all the time as a pastor, like, well, I prayed for healing and so got healed, but God skipped me. Why did he skip me? And it's outcome based, but people get very tense in that because it should be 1 + 1 = 2, and it never does.
Okay, this gets into the physics realm.
Let's do it.
Okay, so quantum entanglement, we bring this up a whole lot, and your connection with things that are not you, like the studio and the people in here and whatever. And we want to sort of write a story that has a happy ending. And a lot of times that if you passed and you were gone out of this earth, it would affect the things that you're entangled with on that quantum level. So we want everybody to live, and we want everybody to have the hero's journey, and we want everybody to have the hero story. But the guy that gets sick still plays the role, and his sickness plays on the influences on the experiences of other people. And so when, we write that out, I don't want anybody to bow out before they're supposed to, but what if they're supposed to? What if somebody's purpose and plan is to not be here anymore?
So there's got to be something greater than yourself.
It does.
That's the whole thing.
For sure.
Because I think when people think of the faith side of things and they think of the prayer and manifesting, any of that stuff, it's very individualistic. It's very quote unquote selfish, to use that term. They're not thinking like, oh, well, maybe the part I'm supposed to play is the sick and die early person. Nobody's thinking that. Nobody wants that role. Nobody's auditioning for that role.
Exactly. But it happens, and it's a big influencer, and you can see how it changes the landscape of making somebody changing the course of what would happen to them. Now, if you wouldn't have bowed out and you wouldn't have had that influence, then that person couldn't have played their purposeful role. Yeah. So what happens though if you're like, hey, I just want to be dealt what I'm supposed to be, and you're like, hey, you're supposed to die, and your death was supposed to carry some weight with 100 other people.
Interesting.
That's an interesting one, yeah.
So then, is there, in your version of things, is there a? It sounds like there's a cosmic author of sorts. Then, if people are designed with a purpose and supposed to do certain things and deserve certain things, and certain outcomes are in play, is there one storyline that you can't change? Like, are we in a fated type situation, as people would say, or at what level do we play a role in this? At what level do I have option A, B, and C, or is it always just option A, and I just don't realize that I'm always picking option A?
So this is like, I'm in pursuit of this one here.
Okay.
And again, with quantum entanglement, you have an infinite amount of versions of your experience, your perceivable experience. And so if every possibility is on the table, meaning that you can experience everything that has some level of probability. So if it's 1% chance that you could be president, could you choose being a president as being your experience? And that's absolute certainty. There's a whole lot of things that have to go between now and you becoming president. Right. But as long as it represents a 1% chance of possibility, you could pursue it. So you're telling me there's a chance? Yes, that's exactly right.
Interesting. Yeah, because you get into that, and you kind of have those folks that are like, well, que sera, what will be, and it's almost like I'm stuck in this fate. There's nothing I can do to alter it, so screw it, I'll just do whatever I'm gonna do. And then you have other people that's like very much manifest destiny, like we're gonna grab the bull by the horns, and we got to shape this and change this and do this. And both of those come from very different worldviews. And so when you're talking about faith, and I like that we have to have faith in the larger portion, not just our portion, and we have to have faith that we're playing the purpose and part that we're designed to play. But in that, you're saying there is an element of choice. that what
There
I'm
is,
hearing?
and I think about it like this: there's sort of like a rut that you're rolling down,
Mhm.
okay, and it gets built ahead of you, but you can kind of control like 2 inches to either side as you roll down this rut. You can't deviate and go 5 miles out of this rut, but you sort of have choice within this. And you know your choices make up the trajectory that you overall take. Now, for a person like me, I test the bounds of this rut that I'm in. I want to know how much of it is what I chose. So let's just say I'm like, I know where I'm supposed to be and I know where I'm not supposed to be. Let's see if I go the not supposed to be route, how close to it I can get before it's taken away as a possibility. I can't choose that. If I can't choose that, then every choice that I try to go in that direction, I'm going to hit a blockade where I know I'm not supposed to be, and it's going to be kept, you know, away from me. And almost always, if you play this game, you're kept 2 inches away from choosing that. Even though you think you're choosing that, it's kept away from you.
Interesting. So I would agree with some of that. I think there's certainly purpose that we all play into. There's certainly destiny on every single person. I think there is an element of choice, but I really think there's more. I don't think you have to be in that rut. It's kind of like I know one of your favorite movies, Greatest Showman. You know, you can change your stars. That whole kind of idea, and those are the stories that truly inspire us. So, are you saying that someone like that, or you could pick somebody else from history, didn't break out of their rut? You know, what the path of least resistance for, you know, P.T. Barnum would have been to continue to be a tailor and, you know, just done his thing, but he broke out of that rut, so to speak. And you see other people that, you know, if they would have just done what was easiest or what was set up for them, they would have stayed inside of that, you know, foot to either side. So are you saying that that's not possible, or his rut was to land in that spot, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, and so I think certain people can break out of that and challenge like the boundaries of either side of that, and then some people won't. And that's why if you see sort of like the regular trajectory that people follow, let me use an analogy. So you have the stock market. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And you have some people who will always be selling when they should be buying, and you always have people that are buying when they're selling. Like Warren Buffett will see total devastation, right? The total collapse of the economy, and normal people, that is their cue to sell. Buffett's sitting back there saying,
let's go.
I'm buying.
Yep, because I'm going to buy this for pennies on the dollar. Yeah.
Knows that even though everybody's scared and everybody will do the exact opposite of what they should do, he follows a principle that leads him in a direction that is not like, it's not intuitive.
Yeah. No.
Does that answer your question? I mean, I know you're butting up against.
Yeah. Well, I know how much coaching I do with people, and they're always like, well, what am I supposed to do? And everybody's worried, you know, am I going to, you know, take the wrong job? Am I going to marry the wrong person? Like, you know, they're so fixated on a kind of that singular track. And that's why I was kind of pushing, like, is there multiple tracks in that sense? Yes. And can we jump the line and say, all right, yeah, I was in this track and this is probably the easiest for me to do that, but I'm going to totally deviate and go.
Well, I'm going to use this example with you in the future as this being you pulling yourself out of that rut that you would have ended up on had a lot of unlikely things occurring. So once you get out of the likelihood, then a lot of unlikely things start happening to you, and you're like, okay, this is my lightning strike moment. Had this not happened, then this wouldn't have happened, and this wouldn't have happened. Yeah. And picture you where you would have been had that first lightning strike not hit, and compare it to here. You can't explain that to somebody as you went off the beaten path, and it led to 5 other unbeaten paths.
For example, you know, just looking at this podcast, you know, you guys decided your time at one church was done. You show up at our church, decide that this is where your next spot's going to be.
Very unlikely of happening because it was the most awkward deal.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It was not. And then, I don't know, you guys were maybe there a month or so, 2 months. And I said, hey, you guys want to go to lunch? We went to lunch with our families at BJ's and connected a little bit, found out what you did and talked for a few minutes. And then I think it was maybe a month later, you were like, how come you guys aren't on Facebook Live? And I said, well, I tried to do it with my phone. It was terrible. And you were like, can I take a crack at it? I said, sure. And next thing I knew, you showed up with gear and all sorts of stuff and had a cool rig set up. And then I think we went to the TV studio next. You came when I was on TCT, and we had lunch, and you said we should do, you asked me, if you could do anything, what would it be? And I said, I would love to be financially independent and the church actually be my active service and not take a salary from the church. And you said, all right, let's make that happen. Like it was nothing. And the next thing you were like, what can we do? And we were like, well, let's try a podcast. And we sat in the church balcony somewhere. It was
do you see like all of these trails? Now, okay, here's the important question.
Mm-hmm.
Who was maneuvering? Who was the catalyst and who was
the puppet master?
So I would say that you motivated me more than I motivated you, and you would say
vice versa.
I was
100%.
So the language that's being spoken here is that we were both picked out of our likely trajectory and pushed off on a trail because we were completely open to it. And I was listening to a voice that wasn't my own, right?
Yeah,
Thinking it was maybe you, and you were doing the exact same thing. So that's the unlikely magic that went on.
That's the scenario you're talking about. And we could probably play that out 15 different times.
Yep. With those other people, like normal people are looking to then what we're doing and saying, okay, I'm ready to get on this train after it's, predictable. Like you didn't know where the end was when you started this, and still don't. And neither do I.
Interesting. I love these conversations. We haven't dove into one of these in a while. That's why I wanted to go this direction today. When you're feeling stuck, do you just automatically like deviate, or do you go back? Like some people, when they start feeling in the rut, like, hey, I'm stuck, I'm going down this, I got my 2 inches on either side, like you were saying. When you start to feel too comfortable in that, do you jump tracks at that point? Like, hey, I'm going to deviate and try something different, or do you zero in and go a little bit quicker?
All right. So this is where my craziness and sort of my business, I'm going to call business craziness. So I speak in analogies. All right. And the reason I do that is because I've taken my understanding of the non-natural world from the natural world. So when I see something, okay, so for instance, use this example this morning. When you look at nature and what nature does, you emulate nature because it's figured it out. As human beings, we're kind of so smart, we're stupid. And in nature, they're so stupid, they're smart. Okay. And so when you sort of watch, I use physics as my sort of like underpinnings and analog. In business, it's called pivoting. Right. So when the business climate shifts, you shift with it. And it's basically saying, taking a 90-degree angle and going off in a completely different direction. So when I hit a barrier, you have 2 choices: run into it and damage yourself, or run along with it till you figured it out and find out its weaknesses and bombard it. That's what we do in the business world.
Right.
And so when a barrier hits me, I need just enough time to understand what I'm dealing with. So I'm going to run parallel to it. I'm going to lose a lot of ground. I'm going to waste a lot of resources until I figure out its weakness, and then I'm going to ready to go hit headstrong again.
No, that totally makes sense. Most people, when they face a barrier, will pitch a tent and camp right there, and they'll spend a decade. Whether it's an emotional barrier, relational barrier, and they don't want to break through that. So let's unpack that a little bit. So when you say you pivot and run parallel, you're sizing up your enemy in that parallel run. What are you looking for?
I don't want to lose momentum because it's so hard to get started once you're going. So even if I'm running at a neutral where I'm not expensing injury from it, now I'm looking up over my shoulder, just like if you're thinking you're running parallel to a big old wall and you're sizing it up, you got to figure out what you're doing. Like either I've got to go then pivot again and move in the opposite direction and pick another, something else to fight, or this one's fightable. I have what it takes to do it. And I need to size up the walls and the scalings and what my enemy looks like.
What tools I need to go over.
Exactly. I need time more than anything.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Because I think so many folks, to use this scripture, will be familiar to everybody, is Psalm 23. It's quoted a lot of times at funerals, but it says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. And I always tell people, we walk through the valley of the shadow of death. We don't camp in the valley of the shadow of death. And so many people get into those spots where they're looking at an insurmountable wall, mountain, whatever in front of them. And they're like, well, I guess this is it. And they learn to live with it, whether that's an infirmity, a sickness, an emotional thing, and it limits their life, but they're like, well, what can I do? It's so big. And what you're saying is just whatever you do, don't stop moving.
So you're using your GPS, you're in a foreign city, and this happens to us a lot, and we're driving the bus around. It's really hard once you get stopped, right? It's sort of like the shark mentality. And so when you get stuck, your instinct tells you stop, bring out the map, and refocus, right? And then when you get going again, you got to bring the energy and momentum back to your travel. So mine is a little different, where I would prefer to stay moving, so I don't have to worry about getting going again, because that's usually half the battle when you're focusing on something. So let's talk about something practical use of this. So let's just use yours, where it comes to some sickness.
Yep.
Okay. So what happens when you stop and ruin your momentum when it deals with sickness? What ends up happening? So go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So
I didn't want to cut you off. Sorry. No, I took a breath.
So your immune system, right? It lowers when you come to a rest. So you end up taking on more sickness. And if you would have stayed going, so you have this path where you expense yourself through stopping, or you let your immune system come to a screeching halt when you bring your momentum down.
Yeah.
So
you're saying on the sickness front, so many people go, well, I just got diagnosed with X, Y, and Z, so I'm just going to stop. And you end up losing certain things. Like I've watched, to use an example of like MS or, some of these diseases that there's no cure. But here you are, you get the diagnosis, and people have one of two choices. Some people go downhill a lot quicker than others. But like I've watched, my mother-in-law for the last 20 years, and she's done a 45-mile bike marathon for different things. She's done all sorts of stuff to keep herself active, because she wants to continue. Hey, I may have this, but it's not going to dictate what I do with my life. Is that sort of what you're talking about?
And so like when somebody retires, you watch them
that's a good illustration.
When they retire, they stop using their faculties, and what ends up happening? Yeah, those systems shut down, and they never are able to come back up to full speed again.
Yeah, and some people, when they retire, they actually work more than because they get to do all the stuff they wanted to do. But that's probably
healthier. You'll watch everybody that succumbs to Alzheimer's or gets into big sicknesses after retirement. It's because they change exactly who they are, come to a screeching halt, and then all of the things that they've been warding off with that comes and squishes them.
Wow. So keep moving.
Yeah, for sure. That's why pivoting instead of stopping, pivoting is important, because you stay moving through figuring out what your next adversary looks like.
No, that makes a ton of sense. And so when you come up to that wall, for somebody that's looking for a breakthrough in their life, their destiny, whatever it is, you're saying, don't stop when you hit the wall. Just pivot, measure it up, get some people around you that maybe know how to scale it and handle it, and figure out how to go over it, but don't stop moving.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of times, like when we do our planning, like Warren Buffett, the reason he can pull the trigger when he's scared and he doesn't come to a screeching halt is because he's already sort of like warmed up to the possibility of what's happening and figuring out what he's going to do. So here's for instance, if I died tomorrow, like my family has like a checklist of what to do if it should happen. So the best way to ward off that from happening is already know what you would do if that. Now they're going to be sad if I, but it's not going to come to a screeching halt.
The show will be very weird, Joe.
Yeah, it will. It will. You'll never mind.
But that's so true. I think in that, even when, they talk about the grief process, my dad passed, you go through the sad, the angry, all that stuff. But one of the things that I've learned is some people will do everything they can. They just don't stop moving. They're like, well, part of it is they don't want to deal with the sad or the angry or what they're feeling. And so they'll just pour themselves into some sort of activity or whatever, because they're like, there's nothing I can do about it. So I just have to keep going. And there's certainly a tension in that, because you do have to deal with those emotions at some point, or they're going to come out at the wrong time with the wrong person. But to stop moving, you're not going to do anything by stop moving. You should, even if you're crawling, keep going forward.
Yeah, and there's a more scientific reason for this, and we're sort of like diluting a principle that works in the physics world down to like the human element where it sort of only makes sense. But once you learn, later in the week, I'm gonna talk about these multiverses and dealing with the energies between them and the expenses, the prices that you pay to achieve things in multiverse worlds make more sense with movement when you deal with like the energy and matter in the physics side. So there's a better reason for this in the physical side than explaining it on the practical, like human element side. So that'll make a little bit more sense later in the week to you.
So you use the word price there. So is there a price, a toll to have what you want, or do you just have to believe to have it?
Oh, there's a huge price. Yes.
And what are some of those prices? Can you give a practical example?
Okay. So you want it from the physics side?
However you want to go, you tackle it.
Okay. So I don't want to do the physics side yet because it's going to go in tandem with a bigger explanation. I mean, we sort of study wormholes and black holes, and the price of that is, you have everything that moves around expenses some kind of energy, right?
Sure.
And the price of expensive energy is one you don't. Anyway, I'll get into that on the physical side. So when we're talking about like Think and Grow Rich, where you're doing the law of attraction, you have to give something to be able to receive something. And the parallel is that burning out like a star means that you expensed and expensed and expensed, and you didn't get reciprocated anything back, and so you gave everything you had, and you burn out, and you kind of disappear on the physical side. But wait, okay, so let's use something more of this world. I went into crazy town, didn't I?
No,
on
this
one. So when you get into the give to get, we'll use relationships. Let me conduct myself a little bit better. Let me think of a better example.
It's the reaping and sowing side of things is the way the Bible teaches it. In Galatians it says, don't be deceived, God won't be mocked. You'll reap what you sow. And it's kind of like this universal principle. Like when I put something out there, I'm going to receive something back. Now, where people get weird with it is like, well, if I gave $100, I'm going to get $1,000 back from this. And it doesn't necessarily correlate that way. Sometimes, I bought somebody's lunch and I got the joy of something else over here. Now, I don't know the correlation of those two things, but the fact that I'm willing and generous to give out, not just financially, sometimes it's I gave extra time to somebody or invested in some way in somebody's life, and then 30 days later it comes back this way, or 2 years later. And so that the principle of reaping and sowing is all throughout Scripture as far as I'm concerned, but I see it all over the universe. I mean, you put seed down in the ground, you sowed those seed into the ground, and then you reap the fruit later. And I think that's the principle that you're trying to get into.
Yeah. So the tenfold part, where you take $100, and you give $10 away, right? As being these new seeds that you put in the ground, and then you get 100 back from that. The tenfold from 10 is 100, and now you have 190. And then you throw 19 out there. So it's this ever expanding, giving to get type of formula. Yeah.
Now with that, and I've heard you talk about this before, you don't give so that you get, because that's where people, when you start to get outcome driven, people start to get disappointed. Well, like, I put $1,000 into this or $2,000 into this. Well, if you did that and you're not getting back the way you want, you start to get disappointed, as if reaping and sowing doesn't work. But just like you said earlier, you're trusting that I have what I deserve, and I'm in the spot where I've been generous, so I'll be treated generous, whether that's financially, relationally, or otherwise.
Yeah, when I'm on the beach and I'm trying to like dig a hole, and like you try to push the sand out and the sand goes in there, like it's basically you're trying to get rid of the parts that you don't need, right? And then it like falls back in, and you have to push it out again. So it's a different mentality where you're not trying to do it for the specific purpose of getting more in return, or else it's not the right process.
Yeah. No, and we could go on and on about law of attraction here, but we're getting close here on time. I just glanced up at the time. We definitely need to pick a chapter. Maybe next Tuesday I'll pick a chapter, and we can do a Think and Grow Rich chapter, which would be good. But we'll be back here Thursday, and we'll be here jabbering on about all sorts of things. But today I hope you liked the conversation around faith, destiny, prayer, manifesting, all of that. I thought it was a lot of fun.
Cool. All right.
See you guys.
Thank you for listening to this show on Youngstown Studio. If you like our programming, we invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow our Facebook page, or subscribe to your favorite podcast platform like iTunes or Spotify. This is original Youngstown content, and we would appreciate you sharing the videos and the word about us. Thank you.